We are live with another episode of Being Human. It's going to be a good one. I'm here with Glenn Akramoff. He is a team building consultant and the author of The Human-Centered Team, Relate, Connect, and Give Your Employees a Reason to Live. Who would not want that? So
absolutely.
Before we came
Thanks
on.
for having me.
Huge warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, for people who are not familiar with you and your work, could you fill us in on your backstory, Glenn, and how you come to be doing what you're doing?
Well, I started as a seasonal maintenance worker in my hometown, and I start there for a good reason. I worked my way through a municipal career from that point to being the city manager, which is the CEO of cities. And along the way, I met a lot of people. Got to know a lot of things. See a lot of organizations struggle, succeed too. So I got to know what worked and what didn't. My real why, though, is and the reason that the subtitle is what it is that I had a couple of people who I worked with very closely in the field, and they were really good friends of mine, and best work friends, I would say. And the workplace that we were in was toxic, and it really ate both of them alive. One of them, I don't know where he is. The other one ended up taking his own life. And so that motivated me to say, okay, what can I do? I don't want to watch Friends. I don't want this to happen to me. What can I do? So I started using my skills and gaining skills, and I learned, I'm pretty good at building teams, and did that as part of my normal career, and then realized I like building teams. I like doing it quickly and getting the problems moving on, and then hand it to somebody who can keep it sustainable, because I like that energy of turning the ship around. And so that's when I became a consultant about 8 years ago. Started my own company just about 4 years ago, and been doing it ever since. And it makes me happy. More than anything, it's super rewarding to go into a place where people are down and struggling and leave knowing they won't do that anymore. When you see someone like this, and then you see them smiling in their eyes, it's an amazing thing to be a part of. So that's kind of the backstory, how I got here and why I do what I do.
Right. Well, that's pretty extraordinary. There can't be many people who go from being, maintenance worker to running the whole city, right? That's an extraordinary arc in itself.
It certainly is. I never intended to do that. It just started to happen, and I had the skill set to do it. I know of very few that have done it, but there are a few, and I think in my case, it made me much better to understand what everybody else was going through as a leader, for sure.
Yeah. It reminds me, there was this, something went viral recently. A LinkedIn profile went viral of a guy who started, don't know if it exists in the US, but there's a very popular coffee chain in the UK called Pret a Manger. And he started as a coffee server and he became CEO.
Yeah.
You should see all the steps on his LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bet that, to me, that's why he can be a world-class CEO in my mind, is that he knows what everyone in the company is working through and all their challenges, so he can speak to them, and he understands everything isn't roses every day.
Right. And tell me about this. So, I mean, that's a tragic opening, this situation with your colleague who took his own life. What were the main factors from a work perspective that you think contributed to him getting to that stage?
Well, he was a very happy-go-lucky type person, for the most part, through the time that I knew him. And for him, all he wanted to do was be part of something special and be part of a team. And regularly in this toxic work environment happens in many. If you're not with the in crowd, then you're not part of the team. And he did whatever he could to do that, and could never felt like he was part of it, that he was part of what was happening. And that was a entire cultural failure of the organization. It wasn't just the leaders. A lot of times nowadays we talk about, well, if, people leave bad managers, which is true to some extent, but many can't, or feel they can't and don't. And then there were some bad managers there. People didn't, the higher ups didn't do anything about it. There was a lot of bullying, you know, um, a lot of negativity, and it was part of the culture to trash your teammates, which was not.
Mm.
And for him, who was a gentle soul, it didn't sit well with him, and he just didn't feel good, and he never felt like he could move on from it. He had a family to support and those sort of things, so he just didn't see options. And then he started self-medicating, and was that was the path to what happened. And the same thing happened with the other one, but a little different story, in that he was driven by excellence. He was one of the best maintenance workers. Actually, not one of. He was the best maintenance worker I've ever worked with, and I work with over 1,000 now. And he was just incredible. But the organization didn't value excellence, and so it started eating him on the inside. He self-medicated, got himself in trouble, and lost his job, lost his family. And so I watch that happen so much in workplaces. So when I go into them, there it is. It's the same situations. Um, and sometimes it's not just the toxic manager, like I started to say. Sometimes it's the team is toxic. And there are a couple of people who like it that way. And so they do everything they can to keep it that way.
Right, right. And I know there are, I suppose you lay out in the book the many angles that we can come at in order to create a human centered team and a healthy culture. Where should we start with that conversation of how we build these cultures?
Well, I think it always starts with culture. And I read something a couple days ago on LinkedIn that said no one person can change the culture. I 100% disagree with that, because I believe that every time a new human being joins a culture, the culture is changed simply by their presence.
Right.
And so being conscious of that, I think, and making people understand their impact, especially leaders. Your impact on the team is absolute. And so that's a big responsibility. I always like to start, when you're doing in culture, it starts with purpose to me. And I talk later about the keys to a winning team. And the first one is aligning purpose. And I always think the culture starts there, because as a human being, I believe, well, we all have a purpose for being here. Some of
Yeah.
us know it, some of us haven't figured it out. And I think about less than 15% actually write it down. So,
Yeah.
they're not, it's not ingrained in them. But every organization also has a purpose. And almost every organization I know, part of that purpose is to serve other human beings in some way.
Mm.
So when those two don't align, that's where challenges come. And I found in municipal government, but I found it in private too, where people don't feel like they can leave because of their personal circumstances. So they stick in a spot that doesn't serve their purpose, and they're miserable, and they don't really know why. They haven't really done that work. No one's talked to them about that. And so they have that negativity. I mentioned the toxic people who like it toxic. Um, Most of the time, it's because they're struggling in life, or hurting in some way, and want other people to feel what they feel. So I don't
Right.
judge them for that. To me, it's about their personal struggles, and it's part of their way to reach out. And over the last 40, 50 years, not everybody, but in general, our society in the US in particular, but probably everywhere, has ignored those cries for help. And so I think in your culture, if when you start acknowledging those and acting on those, um, people start to trust, they start to believe, they start to find where they should be, and they start moving in a positive direction. And there's no organization in the world that once that momentum starts, you can't. It's almost a you can't fail, no matter what you're doing, because it's about people. That's why I said the human centered. That's why we talk human centered.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a very different take on um, people who are behaving, let's say, in a toxic way. Because a lot of the literature out there is about, you've got to remove those individuals. They'll decrease the productivity of the people around them,
Yeah.
significantly. Your job is to take them out of the system, for the benefit of everyone else. But you're coming from a very compassionate place there and saying, well, these people are looking to be heard. They're trying to have people feel what they're feeling. So where do you go with that compassion? Is it about helping to rehabilitate that person, or are you compassionate and you still want to remove them from the culture? Like, what's then your approach?
Well, I think both answers are true.
Right.
But when you first have to have a honest and open conversation with them. So as a leader, you build trust with them, and that's what I do as a consultant in my roles.
Mm,
And once you build a little bit of trust and they know you care about them, right? Because that's why they fight so hard, is because they're scared and they're being removed from a workplace. They don't know what's going to happen to them. So I have that conversation, and it always starts with, "You appear to be incredibly unhappy here. Tell me why. Tell me what that's about." And I'm curious. Truly curious, and I want to know, because then I can help them. And for many, there's a story in the book I talk about this woman who was isolated in a maintenance shop where she had 6 visitors a day. We moved her, and she fought it, but we moved her to City Hall because she was a natural hostess, and she thrived. She loved it, and people came to visit her. Even after 1 week of being there, they came, "Oh, I wanna go see her because she's such a wonderful person, and she's so nice to us." And it changed the culture. That's why I say you can change with one person. It changed the culture in City Hall, where people weren't intimidated and didn't fear coming in there because they had a hostess that greeted them every day. And so she was totally miscast. They wanted to get rid of her. They wanted to fire her. And we talked, and I realized that, and I watched her, and I observed, and the person that I sent her to, that was the work unit, he's like, "I'm not so sure." And I said, "Well, if it doesn't work out, I'll take her back and take care of it." And after a week, he said, "You're not getting her back." So, so I think that's what it was. She was just totally miscast. And because of it, she was acting out just a little bit and being a little defiant here and there, just asking for something different. And I think that's really what it is, having a conversation. When people know, a lot of times when I do that, the first reaction is relief. Someone noticed, someone heard me, and then you can work on it. And that's what I promise them. I will find you the right place to be. It may not be in this work unit, and it may not even be in this organization, but you'll be okay. And we'll find a place where you can be happy and thrive. And we have, I'm lucky enough to have been part of hundreds of those stories.
right. Right. Uh, well, yeah. I mean, and that's a fascinating place to come from. Is what it feels to me like it's pure compassion.
That I would say that that's true. One of the things I learned in my journey, though, is that the way you show love in these situations is that you're really honest. If you're going to be, sugarcoat things, then it's not going to help them. So I don't. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can see the pain in their eyes when you tell them that they don't fit in and they're not they can't do the job. That's a painful thing, and I understand why people don't. A lot of people don't do it, but you have to do it in a way that isn't hurt. It isn't intentionally hurtful too. You know, I've seen
Yeah.
leaders get mad because they have this toxic person, like you said, and we got to remove them, and they go through this whole um, process where they kind of pull their heart out of it because they don't want to feel that way. And I just believe that's not what the solution is. And I noticed this when I was in municipal government. They used to pass bad employees around. And you wouldn't
Right.
tell anybody, right? And you'd give them a decent reference so they could get the new job. And now there's someone else's problem. And that's what that yank them out thing is. Where are they going to go? They need to work and do things for their families too. So, you just move the problem around and this person never heals and never gets better. So I would
And,
say compassionate, yes.
and never heals. So you see part of the process there of helping them to heal.
Yeah. Showing them the way. They have to do the work themselves. But showing them that there is hope, that they don't have to live the way they are, and that they're good enough. Right. Because that's what happens is you get on the wrong path and people hint at, or in the secret corners, they're saying, well, this person isn't good enough. And we're all good enough, especially doing what we love to do and what we're good at.
Right. Right. And how far do you think that responsibility goes then as a leader to help people to heal?
Um, well, I think it goes a long way. For me personally, I made a commitment to be that leader a long time ago. So I tell people when we have worked together, I work with you for life. So if you want to call me, if you got an issue, if you got something I can help with, call me, text me, whatever, email me, and I will respond, and I will do what I can to help. And that's, I've had people call me 5 years later and say, hey, I'm actually moving into another promotion, or I've got these things happening, and um, I remember you said this, and I just need someone to talk to, and I'm just there. And I just think about if almost every leader on the planet did that, what kind of place this would be.
Yeah. It's so it's so interesting that that's the take, yes, because so often in the culture it's your responsibility is to everybody else and to remove, well, I'm repeating myself, but to remove that
Mhm.
bad apple. It's not to extend compassion and love for a lifetime to that individual to have them heal. I mean,
Right.
that's a really powerful.
Yeah. I believe that as a leader, you're not always going to like your people, right? They're going to irritate
Yeah.
you. You're going to irritate them, the whole thing. But in order to be a great leader, you have to love them.
Mm,
And it always sounds corny, but it's true. And that's, I will tell you personally, that's what challenges me. I go in and do a lot of interim work. So I go into workplaces temporarily, and I take this leadership style, the way that I'm talking about, I do that. So when I leave, it's a mourning process for me personally, because
right.
I fall in love with the team and I want them to be successful, and all of them. And so when I walk out, it's gut wrenching for me. It's heartbreaking. But um but then I know that I've had an impact. When I feel that, I know I've had an impact. And that's always been my goal, personal goal. That's been our goal as a company, is to impact. It really is, it's kind of sounds like a tagline, and maybe it is, but our goal, our mission has always been to change the world by changing the workplace.
Yeah. And if people are listening to that thinking that sounds like it's too much of a burden, right?
Mhm.
I'm here to do a role. I cannot be responsible for each and every person's life. I'm worried I would give too much of myself, and I might put my own sort of health at risk if I take that kind of a stance. What's your response to people who may be
I
thinking that?
Well, I think that's fair. That's a fair concern. I have done that at times where I have, put my health and everything aside, but I learned and I teach that nothing you can't give what you don't have. And so you have to be healthy and you have to have a healthy life. And when you're struggling, you need to have your own support system. And it's okay to struggle no matter what level you are, because whether it's okay or not, you're going to. So so acknowledge that that's part of life and part of your journey, and get help when you can. It it is a fine line, but I don't take personal responsibility for everyone. It sounds like I do, but I don't. I take responsibility to fulfill my role as their leader when I'm leading, to make sure that they have they're inspired and they have hope to be able to move forward. And that is not, I mean, when you look at some of the most famous people in our history, um, they weren't. I'm thinking of Winston Churchill. Actually, comes to mind. Not a perfect man at all,
Mm,
but inspired and gave hope, and 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 felt some responsibility certainly to everyone in the country, but made sure that he worked hard to do the right things and move forward, and was put in the right place at the right time. And I think that's for all of us. But I would say, if you want to be a leader and you truly know in your heart that you're going to need to take on some of these things to be a great leader. And and your people will, the rewards are high. I want to be really clear about that. It's not all negative. You're having these tough conversations and everything, but when you see someone go from surviving to thriving, and you had a part in it, it it energizes you. It gives you, the desire to do it again. And those things, not everybody gets to feel that.
mm,
Leaders do.
yeah, yeah. So we talked about culture, and so it sounds to me like one of the things you're saying is taking this loving stance as a leader to each and every person you lead is an important facet to creating
Mhm.
a healthy culture. What else
As far as culture goes,
as
or
far as culture goes?
yeah. I also think you want to be able to set up a couple of things. One is a communication culture and how you communicate, and that's always different depending on what work unit you are, what organization you're in. Everyone has that little thing, but setting up a way where you can communicate, you can have comedy, you can, have a little bit of jesting going on, if that's what the culture calls for. Or if it calls for being super serious, then you know when you have to be and when you're not. And so I think, but it's most important to have keywords that um, that trigger tough conversations. So when you say a few, this a certain sentence or a certain group of words, the other person knows, oh, we're going to have a serious conversation because there's some conflict or something going on. So that, it's a warning, a type of culture that allows you to do that. And a group of words that knows, hey, we're going to relax, and it's just, it's time to be creative and those sort of things. And the most successful organizations have that. They create that. And it's different everywhere. Another part I think is really, every workplace has what I call unwritten rules. You have the written rules, which are everyone knows, and you study, and you get, you got to sign the paper and all that stuff. But the unwritten rules are created to protect people or the team from something. Usually a bad manager or a bad actor in the unit. It's easy to corrupt those because they're not written down. So when people who are struggling or want to take advantage of them, they start using those unwritten rules to protect themselves or insulate themselves. And the big thing is to bring those to light. Those are really challenging because the only way you know that you broke them is once you break them,
Right.
right? You have to break them to
Yeah.
find out,
Yeah.
and then the team will punish you for that. And a lot of times, leaders who aren't involved in that, right? They're not going to punish the leader for breaking that rule. So the leaders, a lot of times, especially if you come into a new work unit, you're unaware of them. And so, big thing is to bring them to light. When I do that, I look and I see the person who's using corrupting them duck their head and turn away and go, "Uh-oh, I've been found out." Um, and then once you bring them to light, there's a reason that they were put in the first place. So let's find out what that is and fix that. Um, and so that's something I focus on regularly. And then the next part, I think the last big one for me, culture wise, is setting up uh, ground rules, values, reason, how we not only communicate but how we behave, and that requires the whole team. That is not the leader deciding that. Once the whole team is involved in that process and agrees to it, they're much more likely to live it. And we're talking about the supervisor's impact. If the team is self regulating, which you can do when you put these values in that they've committed to, your workload goes down, your
Yeah.
stress level goes down.
Yeah.
So, and originally that's how I came up with it. How do I lower my stress level? And when I did that, I realized, wow, they're self-regulating. When it gets to a certain point, they come talk to me because it's appropriate, and then I take action, but I don't have to worry about managing that day to day because they do it. So I think when you put all those things in place, the culture starts to really thrive. People feel empowered to own their workspace, and they
Mm,
do.
right. So it's the purpose, it's the communication norms, it's surfacing these hidden rules. And I'm,
Mhm.
I'm intrigued by that. So could you give an example of a hidden rule and where you've encountered one and how you've addressed it?
Yeah, one of the workplaces I worked in as in multiple interim roles year or two ago. Their one of their written rules was I will complain about everything, but I will take no action because it won't do any good. And people who tried to take action got punished.
Right.
And so when I went in there, I looked around and that was the first one I announced to them. I said, "Well, you have an unwritten rule around here, everybody, and there's 80 people in the room where you're going to complain about whatever comes up, but you will take no action in fixing it. And you think that it won't because nothing will happen. I'm here to tell you that it will, and I'll prove that. But also, complaining is not going to be the thing that we do anymore." So I gave them 2 weeks to complain. I said, "Complain all you want. And as soon as the 2 weeks are up, I don't wanna hear it, and we're not gonna hear it anymore. We're gonna focus on fixing the problems." And to the credit of the entire unit, that's what they did. They complained for 2 weeks about everything. But
Right.
and I got to listen, right? So I got to hear what some of the problems were, and then, the 2 weeks I announced, "Okay, that's over with." And I had multiple solution people in my office after the meeting giving me solutions to some of the problems. They thought about it. We just changed the paradigm there, and I've been thinking about this for 10 years and I think we can do this. And so, and if I, if I thought it was going to work or worth a try, I did it.
Yeah.
And, and that place turned around, in months, and they did it. I didn't. Right? I just
Yeah.
showed them a different path, and then they took off with it, and it was fabulous. And I had told them, and I truly believe this, I had told them that they were a maintenance unit, and I said, "You can be the best in the state of Washington, which will make you one of the best in the country. You can do that. You have the talent, you have the resources to do that." And they took that to heart, and they're now on that path. They might have already accomplished it. So to me, again, all I did was point a vision to them, and they said, "Yeah, you know what? We want that," and they made it happen. So, and it
Yeah.
all started with expressing an unwritten rule.
Right. And then you sort of pivoted into vision, which is
Yep.
your second key, right, in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
and you mentioned critical mass in relation to vision. Talk about that.
Yeah. I think that's the well, I think the big thing for me is that that's part of your job as a leader is to set a vision. So
Mm.
I set that vision, um, and we put it. I put a slogan to it, and I used the slogan regularly. But I realized long time ago that if the vision stays mine, it doesn't happen. And so the example we just used, I gave them a way to move in that direction, and they took it on and said, "You know what? That's my vision. I wanna be the best and at what I'm doing." And they took it on as teams, they took it on as one unit, and then they took it on as individuals. Now, not everybody did at first, but so many of them, like you're talking critical mass, so many of them did and declared that that's what I want, that, the rest were dragged along, and actually not dragged along. They acknowledged, okay, it can be hard work, but I actually want to be part of the winning team too. Um, and again, I didn't try to control that. I just put it out there and then let them take it where they may, and made sure it stayed within the boundaries of good taste and solid culture and was sustainable. And and I think that that's really what it is. If a lot of times as leaders, we want ownership of that vision, and we really can't. We only get it for a few minutes when we come up with it, and then we gotta let it go.
And what is that process of letting go? Because I mean, this is something because of my work as a coach and consultant, we come across the same thing where the leader may have the big vision, and a common frustration is, my team aren't bought into this, or my team aren't getting behind this. Yeah, what is the process for having them take ownership?
Well, I think it is letting them know what's in it for them. I think that's the first thing, right? Is, well, what's in it for me? Well, I spelled that out for this work unit. Um, you act like a champion, you'll be treated like one. Doesn't matter what your job is. People will treat you well. They started to see that happen in a place where it wasn't happening before. When it's just like professional athletes, right? When you are at the top of your game, you get paid more. And I put that out there for them. You want to make more money in this profession and you love this profession, then be great at it. You'll make more money. You get so we've sold prestige and honor, and we've still sold more money, which means how they help their families and everything, which is why they're there in the first place. That's why most of us, put in the hours we do, is so that we can take care of our family and do the things we enjoy doing outside of work. Um, but I also think there's a way you have to bring it together. So in this unit, I created a slogan, and it came from them because they had told me this many times. They had complained the fact that they always get dumped work gets dumped on them because they can get it done. And so I took that and I changed it to, we are maintenance and we can fix anything. And when they took and so I said that at the end of every meeting, I said that. And so I started saying, at the end, I would say, and then they started saying it.
Right.
We are maintenance. And that was my handoff. That was my handoff of the vision to them. And then afterwards, after that, I didn't say it. Either they did or one of the other leaders in the team did. So I made sure went away from me. I let go of it. I physically in front of them let go of the vision and gave it to
Right.
them.
And you
And
and
they
you
took it.
ritualized it, right? You turned this into a
Yes,
ritual.
rituals, absolutely. Um, and it became that way. Many of the work units used it every day the same way. Um, it just took off, and we wrote it down. I had it everywhere, right? Um, but if
But
it
that's the
hadn't,
point. It's not you writing it down, right? Because a ton of people will put statements and they'll have it on posters and they'll have it
true,
written down
true,
everywhere, and nobody ever takes it up, right? There's
right.
something else you're doing than just having it printed out.
Yeah. Well, and I think we printed it out afterwards, and I
Mm,
hand wrote it, right? I didn't polish it up or anything like that. And it was in my office. It was hanging in a I did it on one of those big sticky note pads, and I
right.
put it on the wall, and I just let it sit there. And because I wanted to live it too. I had to live it as well. And so when something needed to be fixed that it was my job to fix, I thought the same thing, and I went and made sure it happened. Um, to me, it was just an amazing thing. And I've used that same technique, never the same words, right? Because every team is different
Yeah.
and has a different focus. But I've used that process many times, and it does work. And you can't just do it right away, right? You can't walk into a new team and go, "All right, we're going to do this." You have to earn their respect and trust, and earn the permission to be their leader.
Mm,
And I think that's something that's missed by many leaders. Your position means nothing if they don't say, "You know what? I acknowledge that you're my leader." And they need to do that in whatever way that is appropriate for them. And once they do that, you now can make those changes, um, and move
that's
forward. And I think that's
fascinating,
something to
isn't it?
remember. Yeah.
Because quite often we'll see these culture change programs, and they're kind of they're rolled out on a schedule, right? We're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
consult. We're gonna figure out the best sort of set of phrases for our values and our vision, and then we're going to communicate it. But in many of those scenarios where people explain the process, they don't have a step for, have I yet got permission to lead here, right?
Right. And it's in my mind, it's always the first step. I just
Mm,
started working in a new unit a couple of weeks ago. So I'm 2 weeks in, two plus weeks in, and that's all I'm working on. I'm listening. I'm talking to them. I do one-on-one meetings with every person, always have. And many of them have said, "I've always wanted this to happen." And it's the first time I've met with a manager in my entire career, one on one. I'm like, wow. Um, and so right there, that person I earned some respect with them right away. And I always tell them that, and I think this is true. Hey, I'm not asking you to respect me or trust me. I'll earn it. I'll learn them both. And then I go about proving that I'm going to earn it. And once I do, then I now have their permission to lead. And
yeah,
some people that happens really fast. I've had a couple that I've won over already in 2 weeks. And then there are others who are going to take me a couple of months. They're very standoffish, and rightfully so. They've been wounded before. And so I'm going to find out why and how, and find out how to connect with them.
yeah. And then presumably then when you feel like you've got permission to lead from a critical mass, then you can start with the vision.
Yep. Yeah. And I let that vision come to me as it needs to. Like right now, this new work unit, I know kind of where technically I want to take some things, and I'm starting to understand the people and understand the impacts to them. We talk about in the book external forces. I'm understanding those,
Yeah.
but but the vision is not ready for me to put out there because I don't know what it is yet. I shared the other unit. It was, become the best of the best because they could. This unit, that's not what drives them. That's not what's going to drive them. They want to provide. So far, it looks to me like they really want to provide excellent service, and they want their community to um, to look better and to operate better. And so that's where their focus is. They know that what they do is important, which is not always the case. So I don't need to sell that their job's important. That's not going to be part of the vision of this unit. Most of the time it is. And this one, I don't need to do that because they've got it. So it's always an interesting process. And about 6-8 weeks, that'll start to become clear to me. And that's about the time that I get the critical mass to have permission to be their leader.
Right. Um, the other concept you introduce is this idea of defining the season.
Yeah.
Talk more
Yeah.
about that.
Sure. Well, one of the things I noticed in a municipal career is that you can't, everyone would look at it. And I had a guy who said this to me in my early career. We got full time jobs together at a city. And he said, once I clear probation, I'm cruising to a 30-year career. We're 2 months in, right? I'm like, wow. And then I started to realize, well, you can't perform. Everyone talks about performing at a consistent level. Well, we as human beings aren't consistent. It's not how we're designed. And so I realized that we need to be able to have a season. And I took this from sports. I played sports, my whole life. And I realized there is a season. It's easy to define what a win and a loss is in any sports season, but it's harder in a workplace. But you still need to train. You still need to rest. You still need to have an off season. Some applications are harder, finance and some of the others, they do things consistently, like pay the bills and all that. But they have a budget season and they call it a budget season.
Yeah.
So you start thinking about, okay, you need to define what that season is so your people know when they've got to go hard and when they can go less hard. You can't go hard for 30 years. So my whole thing was that means your performance actually is less than it can be.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's that. So it's easy in maintenance. Also, it's very easy for a maintenance season because you have your growing season and your non-growing season. So that becomes your construction season because when the weather's good, you're doing construction. So, here in the U.S., it's from most of the work units. We talk about March 15th to October 15th. That's your season. And my expectation as the leader is you go as hard as you can throughout that season. Do your best every day. Once we get to October 15th, we gear back and we clean up our equipment and we fix it and we heal ourselves because we pushed hard and we start training from April 15th back to March. We're going to do our training. So I don't mind if people are out for 3 days going to do training to get themselves, trained up on being better. I want them to heal their bodies in maintenance. Your body gets beat up pretty good. So you've got all of those dynamics that come into a season. And I also, you need to have a time to celebrate how well you did. And I talk about that's later in the book, but
Mm.
in order to celebrate, you got to have a beginning and an end. And so we create one with a season. I have always done a half season event as well to let everybody know, hey, we made it halfway. I know you're starting to get tired, but hey, we're halfway. October's not that far away. Let's you know take a day off, take a deep breath, and then recommit to finishing up a good season. Um, and it also allows the leader to give pep talks and to do halftime speech type things and all that sort of stuff to motivate and inspire, um, and help them understand how important their work is. And so I also do the same thing at the beginning where we talk about, okay, we're going to start going hard on March 15th. I start talking about it in January. Okay, get yourself ready, get all your final training in, take a extra day or two off, get ready to go for the season. And people actually enjoy that process because they
Mm.
know there's a beginning and an end.
And and how does that translate then into knowledge work where there isn't necessarily a natural cycle to fit a
It
season into?
It I think it you can do it in short spurts, right? So you can do it project based. So I think that's a big part of it. You could have, you know, I think about some of the technology people that are inventing things or creating new programs. They have a project base, so that can be their season.
Mm.
You can, like I used in finance. Not every, there are routine jobs that are very routine in nature, but and there's some people who just love the routine and are fantastic at it, but they still need to have a beginning and end. So you can do it by the month, use quarters, right? We have the financials, you can do the quarter thing. You can break it up any way that makes sense for your team. Like I used finance. Finance has always told me, well, we can't do that. I go, well, you have a budget season, right? Well, yeah, but well, you focus on that. Um, and as long as you create a beginning and an end and some measurement of what success looks like, as I talk about defining winning, if you define what winning is, and then you define the timeline, that's really what the season is. So then you can say, we won, and this was our season. And as long as you do those things, and then you take a moment to take a deep breath and say, we have an off season, even if it's 2 weeks. Hey, we start the next project 2 weeks from now. Let's re-gear up, do your training, do your healing, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, and I suppose what plays into this is debriefing, and right, and one of your keys is
Yeah.
debriefing constantly.
Yeah.
So talk about debriefing constantly.
Well, I think that's, you know, you in order, we talk about culture, but you need to put that in your culture that it's debriefing. It's not, it starts out very formal, right? We look at debriefing where we get in a room and we talk about every little we talk about the details and we say, what went well, what did, but to me, that's really all it needs to be is three things, three questions. What what did I do? What went well? What didn't? And what am I going to do different next time? And you can
Mm.
do that with every task. Every task. So I just posted on LinkedIn. Okay, what went well? What didn't? And then what am I going to do different next time to make it better? And you can easily, that's how you learn. You identify what my learning is in this thing. And when you get everybody doing it, they stop asking the questions in a formal way. It just comes to their mind and they'll start going, boy, that went really well. I can't think of anything that didn't go well. I'm going to do it just that way next time. That's all it takes. And once you put that in there and everyone's doing it, then your company is constantly growing. You're not getting stagnant. When a new process or something shows up, you ask yourself those questions, or at times the team will ask each other, and then you fix it right away. And so you're much more nimble. And in today's world, you've got to be. You've got to be able to change on a dime, and that's how you do it. And that's another one of those let go moments for a leader. You don't need to be involved in that if you do it right. And
Right.
they just change it, and you give them permission to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's always one of my core things that I tell people when I come in. That's actually one of our company expectations, um, is fix it. If there's a problem, fix it. You have full permission and authority to do so. And I think that's the big part of that debrief piece. You have to give them the permission to fix it once they debrief it.
And that makes total sense, because if there's any sense in their mind that if I'm going to go through this effort of analyzing my actions and then I've got every chance of being told I can't fix it based on my insight, well, I'm going to do that like
Right.
a couple of times, right? And then I'm never going to do it again.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Why should I is the question they ask. and and the answer is always I shouldn't, so I won't. And then you're headed down that path to toxicity.
Yeah. And I mean, in my experience with companies, that is so prevalent. Uh,
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
into any situation, and you give them a chance to air their frustrations, and So the first question you naturally ask is, well, have you suggested that change? And they're like, yeah, of course I did, but I stopped suggesting changes like 10 years ago.
Right. And I just, to me, that is, it's tragic. Is what that is. For them personally, for the company. I mean, are you kidding me? You could have solved this problem 10 years ago and you still, how do you, how are you surviving, let alone being successful?
Yeah, and to be fair, that's in companies that are less prone to external pressures. But
Right.
even if the sort of the business survives, it does eat away at the happiness and the fulfillment of every individual when they don't have that
And it
autonomy.
yeah, and it reflects to your customer experience, no matter
Yeah,
what company you're in. I mean, in local government, where I've spent a lot of my career, experience is what your business is.
yeah,
And if you're disgruntled and you're frustrated because you can't fix this problem that affects the customers and they complain about it every time for 10 years, you're listening to a complaint you can't do anything about, and you know the solution, you
mm,
can't fix it. I mean, the frustration level just woof,
yeah,
through the
yeah,
roof.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, well, I suppose local government is synonymous with poor customer services. So I had to
It
say it, but
well, I think you're right. It doesn't have to be, but I think you're right, because because when in that situation we just talked about, now you're going to focus on you. I'm just going to get through the day. I'm going to focus
yeah,
on me, and so the customer feels that and says they don't care about me, and even if they do in their heart, they can't do anything about it, so they just give up. And so when you light that fire back up, the customers know it, and that's what
mm,
I talked about earlier, the champion thing. When you behave like that and you behave like a champion and you're providing world-class service, they will reciprocate at the highest levels.
yeah, yeah. Um, you talk about flow performance as your seventh key. Yeah,
Mhm.
what do you mean by flow performance?
Well, we started to talk a little bit about human beings aren't consistent. They aren't created to be, right?
Mm,
We go in cycles, and I studied through, first my son, because his stepmother said he can do anything for 6 weeks. So I went, okay, so let me watch him. I started to realize there was a pattern. So then I looked at myself, and then I looked at my team, and I realized we all have separate patterns, but it's usually on a 6 week type cycle. And I experimented with, how to, can I manipulate that, was my first question. Can I make that work for the team? And so first thing I did was try to get everybody on the same cycle. And I was successful. The problem is that we all went way up and way down. And so I'm like, wow, that didn't work. So then I realized, you if we try to be consistent, we're here. If we let everybody move up and down in their own cycle, but we're trying to make, the team kind of cover each other, then you end up being at a much higher performance level as a unit. And so that's really the performance flow, is knowing where everybody is in that flow, knowing where you are personally. And because the way it works is you kind of ramp up, and for 2 weeks, and then you have what I call a performance plateau, where you're up there. And anybody can think about it as, you know, you'll be doing stuff and you're producing a ton of work, whatever you're doing, and you're doing it, it's going well, everything's just working perfectly. And then all of a sudden, a week later, you can't type, you can't do whatever you're working on. You're like, why is this? It's because you're in the down cycle, because as a human being, you need to rest and take a break. And when you don't, then it gets worse, right? You're pushing that cycle and it gets worse and worse and worse. And because you have the downturn, and when you get into that trough of low performance, the farther you try to push yourself on the plateau, the farther down you'll go. So you can consciously do that. And I have done that. I kind of manage my stuff by that, if when I can. I'm scheduling these podcasts that way. When I'm in I feel like I'm at a plateau in my performance right now. I'm going to end in about the end of the week. And so, I know that I wanna be on these things when I'm at the top of my game, right?
Right.
So that's what I've done is I try to schedule them when I know I'm in that plateau somewhere. So I may do 3 or 4 or 5 in a row in a 2-week period, and then I won't do one for 3 weeks because I'm working into that plateau. And I also know I can extend it, but the trough's gonna be deeper. So if I'm getting ready to go on a vacation and I'm going somewhere where I know I'm just gonna relax and disengage from everything, then I'll push it. I'll push it out because I know I'll be fine. I'm okay if I'm sitting on a beach somewhere, and I'm not at the top of my game.
Right.
So so it's a self-awareness tool, but it's also a team type tool. And I encourage everybody to look at it. Watch yourself, document it. Say, hey, when these things are going well, these aren't, and kind of just document it, and you'll see that you have a cycle. Then you need to be okay with it. Right?
Yeah,
That's the
because you can
next thing.
imagine. Well, my immediate instinct to that is how could I game it right? Like how could I just
Right.
stay high all the time?
Right. And you want to, but you can't. And so, and I was, you know, I tried every way to cheat the system because I thought
Mm,
I can find the cheat code. I can do this. But I realized I really can't, and I really don't want to, right? What's
right.
wrong with having a weekend where you just relax
Yeah.
and just do fun things that you want to do? That's what you're working so hard for. So, um, and I found you can manage a team that way. And I do. When we were talking earlier about this team unit, I'm starting to figure out who's where on the scale, and where they are in their performance flow, so I can start helping them, manipulate it and understand that, the supervisor in particular, hey, you may not want that person doing this task during that week because they're about to fall off a little bit and not be able to perform at the high level. But I think self acceptance there is the biggest thing. Okay, all of a sudden I can't type, and that's where it shows up. That's why I say that it's one of my show up. I can pound out typing and I'm doing great. And then all of a sudden, I type and I look at the words and there's none of them spelled right. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, here we are. This is a signal to me that I'm not, I'm headed down to where I need to rest and break.
Yeah. It's surrender, right? That's the word that comes to
Yeah.
me. It's that willingness, and it's something I'm learning to be comfortable with is just surrender.
Yeah.
Surrender to tiredness, surrender
I,
to exhaustion, and just
yeah.
like I allow my ego to accept that the body's tired.
Right. I like that. I definitely like that surrender. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Um, and interesting as well as you talk about that's fully accepted in the sports
Yeah.
realm, where we manage performance to a greater degree than perhaps anywhere else.
Right.
So, why not import some of that thing if,
And that's,
if high
yeah.
performance is what we're after?
Right, and I think we all are because I believe we all wanna be on a winning team, we all wanna be
Mm,
successful, whatever that means to us individually, and so finding the ways to be able to do that, to the best of our ability, whatever that means. I mean, we all have it goes back to your individual purpose, I believe that's like your fingerprint. It's different for everybody in some way, form, or fashion, and you know, how you manage your cycle and how you get to feel like your success because we're all that's another thing I think try to think abundantly and we all have the ability to be successful and no one really is in our way of doing that except for mostly ourselves.
yeah, 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 yeah. That makes total sense. Now you're an owner of racehorses.
I am. Yep.
I don't know if that's plural actually right now, but uh, tell me what you've learned in the domain of racehorse ownership.
Well well I think the first thing was the word you used earlier is surrender. um the horse is not a machine. They have their own personalities, which, as you get to learn, is a way positive thing. They most of the time, unless they're a jerk, which we've owned at least one of them, that was not a nice horse, but didn't have a great personality. But you also learn that they're going to run when they run, and that when they're ready, you run them, and when they're not, you don't. That you do have a responsibility to take care of them, um, and that they will give back an amazing amount. I mean, when my mom passed away, I went down to the barn, and it wasn't even one of our horses. It was someone else's that I connected with, and I'm just petting him and feeding him carrots, and he and he put his head on my shoulder, and he just knew that I was struggling. And so
Mm,
I went down to see him for every day for weeks, and it helped me get through it. And horses are that way. They're just very intuitive to humans' energies, and they really want to please you. And thoroughbreds love to run. That's what they love to do.
right.
And so they're thriving when that's happening. And people ask me, well, do they really know they won? Oh yeah, yeah. They they won. There's a famous horse called Zenyatta years ago. She won all of her races until her last one and lost. And she was headed towards the winner's circle. She thought it was a really close race. She lost by like an inch, and she was headed to the winner's circle. She's like, "No, I belong there. That's where I go." And and it was her last race. But I think to me, they know that you can see them. They know when they win. They know when they've been successful, just like we do. And so, but to me, it was the big thing is surrender. And we started talking about compassion
Yeah.
earlier, right? And I think that's what the horses have, that in abundance, that
Mm,
just makes them an incredible species. And um, when I started in getting into that, I didn't experience that, but once I did, it changes how I see how it is, and it's why I enjoy going and being a part of it.
yeah. And as you speak, Glenn, I suppose what I'm so present to is your capacity to love. And I just feel the strength of your heart. And I'm curious, like, have you always had this deep capacity to be a loving presence, to love? Is this something you've had to develop?
I had to expose it. I would say as a youth and in my younger years, I had it, um, but you know, some of the world tells you to hide that, and
Right.
my dad was a police officer, so there was a long time in our family we hid our emotions, and we went through a family experience that taught us all to open up, and we kind of had a rebirth as a family. Um, I had never. My dad told this story before he passed away, and that he called it the two hugs, and it was the first time as adults that um, he and I had hugged, and I was 40. And I asked him for a hug, and then that's why he called it two hugs. I hugged him, he hugged me, and it changed the way our family operated. And so we still to this day don't separate as a family unless we hug each other.
Right.
And um, and so going back to it, I knew I had it. I never understood really what it was and how to use it until we went through that experience, and then I realized I'm going to express that to the world, and if people reject it, they reject it. I don't care. And I was taught that by my mom. My mom was that, don't worry about what people think, just be you. So I had to learn to use it and learn to
Right.
express it. And many people are not comfortable with it at first, right? And I wasn't at times, right? Because, I'm brought up to be a tough guy. And you can still be this way and be a tough guy. So
Right. Yeah.
and I learned that. So
Yeah. I mean, and that's it doesn't in any way diminish the sense of your authority or your gravitas or any of these things. It enhances it.
Right. Right.
That's what I'm also very present to.
Yeah. And that
It,
and that's what I had to learn. That's the part I had to learn is that it does enhance everything I'm doing. Um,
mm,
and in some ways, it sets me apart, sadly, because I think everyone has this capacity, but
yeah.
or most everyone. So, and so if I can have someone, to see that and start doing it in their own life, just one person, then I've done my job. I've done my work.
And as you started to express it and show it, as you say, you, and perhaps you yourself felt discomfort, or you noticed in others there was a discomfort around it. Was there anything you told yourself, or did you take any particular approach just to allow yourself to kind of expand this lovingness around
Um, well, I had to. I felt like I had to, again, like we talked about, when you go into a work unit or you're with people, there has to be some understanding of who you are before you start expressing that.
you?
In
Right,
in the so there's different levels. So I learned that there opportunities will show up for you to express that caring and that love for people.
right.
And so you look for the opportunities. And they start slow, they start, on the surface a little bit, and then you just start to show them. Um, and when people open up to me, th- you know, about their struggles or whatever, and they do, then I get to show that back to them. And what I realized, as I was going through the process and doing the work that I do, I realized for some people, um, just like my story, I'm one of the only ones that they're getting that from in their entire life at that time. And, you know, like we said earlier, I don't see that as my whole responsibility to take care of them or be, that role for them, but to show them that it's out there and that you can find it, is pretty powerful. And
Mm,
um, I've every workplace I find a couple that, they're isolated in their world, and certainly coming out of what we had, a few years ago, that was really prevalent. And some people hadn't talked to people in an emotional, expressive way in 2 years. And
yeah,
so when they started doing that to me, and I could show them that, hey, there are people out there who will listen, are compassionate, and will care about you. You know, it allows them to open up to receive that, not only from me, but from anybody in the world. And then there you go. They're off and living the life they want to live.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And as you spoke earlier about giving people hope, or like a bit of hope, and that was part of your responsibility. And I can see now that demonstrating this love gives them hope that they can find that loving connection elsewhere, right?
Yeah. And for some people, it's to realize that they're worthy of love.
Right.
Sad as that sounds, but
Yeah.
some people are going through a lot of things that they can find proof that they feel like they're not. And so when someone shows it, that where you don't expect it in the workplace, then and in a leader, it changes their understanding of themselves a little bit.
Yeah. 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 That's right. It causes a transformation inside
Mhm.
them. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a two-way. Yeah. It's an exchange. Yeah.
And I want to. I said it before, but I want to be clear. I get so much out of this process.
Mm.
They every religion, every talks about when you give, you get, and
Yeah.
that is, I get much more than, at least I feel like I get much more than I give, and it empowers me to give more, um,
Yeah.
and gives me the energy to do it. Right? It's because it's there's some days the energy does wane.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. Even as I laugh at you saying that, right? It's my own nervousness around like accepting that. Yeah, of course we wane. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
our power isn't like 100% all the time.
No.
It's
No.
it's who
I
we
mean,
are.
even in the video games, right? You got to build your power, do a big activity, and then you got to
Yeah,
go back and build your power again, or do it as you move.
yeah. Lose a few lives, you got to build your lives back up. Yeah,
That's right. Same thing. Same thing in everyday life. As Stephen Covey said, you've got to sharpen the saw.
yeah, yeah. And again, relates to love. Can we love ourselves? Love
Yeah.
ourselves through the triumph and the rest and the healing, and yeah,
Yeah.
stay in tune with what we need moment to moment.
And that may be the most difficult thing, is to love ourselves as much as we try to love others.
Right. Yeah. And yeah. And I'm get but I'm presuming when you had that hug with your dad, that fostered your ability to love yourself as well as others.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was the fact that I asked, right? I mean, I stressed about asking, right? And of course you think about it, my dad was always there. Um, I tell stories in the book. The book's dedicated to him and my mom because they were always there for us. But we just hadn't done that. And when I allowed myself to express that, you're right. It changed how I saw things and saw myself. I think the thing about that makes it different for each of us as individual is we know all our own thoughts, right? You don't know anybody else's except how they express them, but you know all the secrets. So you're like, well, nobody knows how bad I am. Well, yeah, they have the same sort of thoughts, but they also don't know how good you are
Yeah.
when you look at it that way. So, you get to choose whether you choose abundance or scarcity. And you know, I always try to go to abundance, and I've been lucky enough to be given a lot of abundance in my life and an abundant capacity to do this work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe that's the note to end it on. I mean, um,
Yeah,
yeah. Seek and you shall find, right? If we live in this expectation of abundance or
yeah,
acceptance of abundance.
yeah, and it shows up. There's a lot of understanding about that in science and elsewhere about the understanding abundance and there's a lot of folks out there talking about manifesting, and that's kind of what it is when you expect abundance, the universe tends to give that to you. When you expect scarcity, it gives that to you too.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you have enough self-love to accept it in when it shows up, right? Then
Yeah, yeah,
then it compounds. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, Glenn, this has been amazing. I've been so touched, moved by what you've shared and who you're being, and yeah, the message you've got. It's been fantastic.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it a lot, and um, I appreciate being able to be here today.
Wonderful, and thank you for getting up so early to, to have this conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. I can't wait to get it out there onto all the other platforms. So we we'll have it out there on all the channels shortly, and we'll put a link to the book again. The
Awesome.
Human Centered Team: Relate, Connect, and Give Your Employees a Reason to Live by Glenn Akramoff for people who want to search it. Anywhere else you'd send them? Your own organization as well. Matt, perhaps share the link for people who want to connect with you and
Yeah,
potentially work with you.
we have a website that's at acromoff.com, and you can find a lot of the stuff we're talking about there. Um, we are on LinkedIn. We post stuff there regularly, and we have the book is on Amazon, but it's also at thehumancenteredbook.com.
Thehumancenteredbook.com. Great. And we'll put all those links into the show notes. Okay. Well,
all right.
Thanks once again, Glenn. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks again.